So on your feet. We're making cinema! Yes, sir!
Good everyone, I'm IrishAnimeFan, and for this video I will be talking about the BL anime series, Twilight Out of Focus. And before you ask, no, it is not a blurry version of Twilight.
You could have fooled me.
Set in an all-boys school, second-year high schoolers Mao Tsuchiha and Hisashi Otomo have been living together in their dorm room for a year. The two roommates have built their friendship on 3 vows they made to themselves. For Mao not to out Hisashi as gay, for Hisashi to not make a move on Mao, and for both of them to respect each other's privacy when it comes to, doing their business. However, Mao is also a member of the school's film club, and the club's next short film just happens to be a BL, with the director's eyes firmly on Hisashi playing the lead role. With this casting in mind, Mao begins to develop feelings towards Hisashi that he's never felt before, and as production on the film goes ahead, the promises they made to each other are soon put to the test. The first thing I want to mention here is the setting itself. The film club serves as the primary backdrop for the series, and I really liked how it was utilized here. It briefly delves into the inner workings of a film set, from budgeting and location scouting to actually shooting the film itself, basically going into what it takes to make a short film in the first place. As someone who has been involved in a couple student film clubs in the past, I found that there was a certain sense of authenticity about how it was presented. You can tell that these members all have a history together, from how they interact and banter with one another, to how certain rivalries are formed within the club, mainly between the second and third year students. It really feels like you're a part of this close-knit community who all share the same goal of making art that hopes to make a big impact on society, which certainly resonates with those of a similar background. And of course I am talking about all those annoying film nerds who would rather spend all of their time talking about the latest Paul Thomas Anderson film than actually touching some grass. How long has that camera been recording? But the film club and the character's passion for filmmaking also has a metatextual impact on the series, specifically with how it utilizes its own visual language. For instance, whenever there is a romantic moment, it's presented in widescreen to give it a cinematic quality, breaking away from the mundanity of everyday life represented by the standard aspect ratio made for TV anime to capture and convey these more intimate moments. It's a simple enough way to convey this feeling, but I found it was used really effectively. I also like how Mao's eyes almost resemble that of camera lenses. I mean, it makes sense because he is the club's director of photography, but that's also interwoven into some of its key scenes. For example, there's the ending in the 3rd episode when they're reshooting the film's confession scene. This takes place shortly after Hisashi and Mao start dating, by the way. In the context of the short film within the series, it's a simple enough confession scene, with Hisashi telling his co-star that he loves him in the midst of a twilight sky. Let's put a pin in that. But there's a bit more going on beneath the surface. As Hisashi says his line, he looks straight into the camera, and by proxy Mao, almost as if he's saying the line directly to him. Mao's pupils then dilate, which highlights his surprise obviously, but it's also illustrated in a way that it's like he's almost enhancing this exchange, like a camera focusing in on its subject, amplified by how Hisashi appears larger in the frame. By that point, Mao becomes so overcome with emotion that his vision begins to blur, mimicking that of a camera going out of focus, which, and I think it's time for me to take the pin out, directly refers to the title of this series, Twilight Out of Focus. Oh, I see you, anime. I see what you were doing there. While I admit that the overall production of the series is a bit on the generic side at points, I have to commend Studio Dean for their attention to detail for scenes like these, and for utilizing the medium of animation to help enhance Janome's original manga. But I've rambled enough about the production side of things, let's get into what you all came here to see. Me talking about cute anime boys getting it on. Now, the plot synopsis I gave at the beginning of the video more or less outlined the relationship between Mao and Hisashi. The series actually explores 2 more pairings on top of that. It's pretty much the Junjo Romantica or the Sakaichi Hatsukoi approach to BL storytelling. I'll talk about those pairings more when we get to them, but for right now, let's talk about Mao and Hisashi. Despite the initial basis for their dynamic being so interesting, the relationship as a whole is, for lack of a better word, pretty plain. I mean, as soon as they made those promises, I knew that they were going to be broken, or at least a little bent. Much like Mao was as he was being railed by Hisashi. But my biggest issue with these two is that, in terms of their character development, it's very lopsided. Hisashi is the more developed character of the two, with the series delving into his tragic past, which involves him coming to terms with a coercive and toxic relationship, and how that's shaped him into this cold, distant person who struggles with communication. And while the execution of those issues come off as a little crass at times, at least there's something there that the audience can latch onto. Unlike Mao, who clearly drew the short straw in this relationship because we barely get to know him outside of being in the film club and him being possessive over Hisashi. And even the crumbs of his past we do get aren't really expanded upon. For instance, in the first episode, when the topic of love comes up, Mao says that he once had feelings for someone, but not anymore. Who is this person? What significance did they have on Mao's life to make him say that? Like, we don't get to find out much more than that because it's never brought up again. Thankfully, his characterization is salvaged near the end, when the anime shows Mao looking inward and doubting whether he's doing enough in his newfound relationship. Luckily, the pairing that the series focuses on next is a lot more entertaining and fun to watch. Gichi Ichiaawa, the rising second-year auteur amongst the film club, has always had a long-standing rivalry with the club's president, the third-year Jin Kikuchihara. They clash with each other on everything. What they value the most in their art, what direction the film club should be headed in, even their lips can't help but clash into each other. However, when Gichi suddenly moves into Jin's dorm room after a family emergency, the two of them make an effort to get to know each other more beyond being mere adversaries. From the jump, I really liked this dynamic. Watching these two awkward film nerds with big personalities process their feelings for each other in their own over-the-top way was so endearing to watch. It also helps that they're two of the best written characters in the series. Gichi, for most of the time, is really opinionated about what he thinks cinema should be, and thus takes a lot of pride in his own work. However, when he lets his hair down, both figuratively and literally, he mellows out considerably and is overall quite a chill person. And Jin comes across as this confident, flamboyant, and somewhat narcissistic figure within the film club itself, but underneath all that pompous showboating is someone who is very insecure about their own abilities. But despite their differences, they also share a lot of common ground. Of course, they both have an interest in film, but as writer-directors, they also take care of their respective film crews, and seeing them bond over BL manga was so delightful. I could definitely see the echoes of Sasamiya all over this couple. For me, these two were easily the highlight of the series, and I low-key wished that they were the main couple over Hisashi and Mao, but hey, I'll take what I can get. The last couple the series follows is Shion Yoshino and Rei Inaba. I have feelings about these two, but let me back up a bit. First year student Shion has only one goal in life: for him to get a boyfriend. So he enrolls at the all-boys school and joins the film club for the sole purpose of finding his soulmate. But Rei, the club's former vice president, dashes Shion's dreams by warning him that he'll never find a boyfriend here. However, after seeing Shion being visibly upset by what he said, Rei attempts to console him by suggesting that the two of them should start dating. So they do, and that comes with its own set of challenges along the way. This part of the anime was strange. Firstly, and I'm sorry to say this, but I'm not that fond of either character, I'm afraid. Shion is that stereotypical, fruity as hell, capital G-A-Y gay anime boy, and while that in and of itself isn't a problem, my issue with his character is that he doesn't have any depth beyond that.
Not to vent or anything, but I've never had a boyfriend before, so I don't know what to do. I've been craving and burning to be held by a man!
And Rei is nothing more than a bland and monotone side character with a dumb hat on his head. And with that, neither of them are compelling enough to have a full arc centered on them. Not to mention that the entire groundwork for their relationship is based on manipulation tactics, which I thought was really weird. It's not the worst thing I've seen in BL, but a red flag is still a red flag. But the biggest problem I have with this part of the anime is that it all feels so contrived. From Overall's internal monologues to the characters, without provocation, dumping their entire life stories onto each other and by proxy the audience with very little setup. It feels like it occurs for the sake of the plot rather than it happening organically. I could see glimmers of a decent couple in them, but I could not see much chemistry there, and as far as the execution was concerned, I just didn't buy it. And that's perhaps the biggest problem I have with Twilight Out of Focus as a whole. Each couple in the anime are given about 3 or 4 episodes to build and develop their relationship, and that by itself isn't a bad thing, but the main issue I have with it is that, as you could probably tell by my own thoughts on each pair, the quality is very inconsistent, and if you're not particularly invested in one couple's story, then the pacing of the entire series just grinds down to a halt. It would have been nice if we cut back to other characters and see what they were doing to not only give them more to work with, but to also break the monotony of being with the same couple over and over again for 3 to 4 episodes at a time. Okay, I've been dodging this for a while now, but I think it's time we address the pink gay elephant in the room. You see, when the show first aired back in the summer of 2024, it was subject to a bit of controversy. But nothing to do with the actual show itself, but rather how a small group of people reacted to it. This small, loud, and apparently sane group of people thought that the most normal reaction to seeing a show that prominently featured LGBTQ+ characters at the heart of it was to review bomb it to hell and back on Crunchyroll, littering the review page with 1-star reviews filled with homophobic rhetoric and bemoaning about how woke Crunchyroll was for featuring it on their website, and how gay representation as a whole had no place in anime. Okay, 3 things to say to that. Number 1, I was there watching anime during that season, and I don't recall Crunchyroll pushing that series any more than any other show they had licensed that season. Yes, you did have clips and screenshots uploaded to their social media channels, but that's not favoritism. That's just standard procedure. Number 2, and I hate to be the one that breaks it to you, but BL anime has existed for decades at this point, and it goes back even longer if you count the manga, which paved the way for these anime to be greenlit in the first place. And number 3, this is an adage you've probably heard of before, but apparently it needs to be reiterated time and time again. If it looks like a show you're not going to enjoy, then don't watch it. Like, I know it sounds a bit rich coming from me, an anime YouTuber who feels kind of incentivized to keep up with what's currently airing each and every season, but you don't have to follow that. Now, that's not to say that Twilight Out of Focus is this perfect show above criticism or anything. I think I've made it pretty clear throughout this video that I don't think that is the case, but there's a way to go about it without acting like a bigoted piece of shit. Hell, if you actually gave the anime a chance beyond that first episode, you would have come across a scene where it felt like it was speaking directly to people like you. Case in point.
For future reference, calling something shit or idiotic is just emotional vomit. Critiques are when you explain your vomit.
You know, maybe the next time you talk about a piece of media online that you don't particularly like, I'd consider taking that piece of advice on board before resorting to your typical talking points or dog whistles. Or even worse, have a hack right-wing YouTube grifter tell you what to think, like the fucking sheep that you are. But because all of this was going down, Crunchyroll had to take action. And what they decided was the best course of action to take was to nuke the review and comment section, not just on the anime's page, but across their entire website. All those messages and forum posts that have built up and accrued over the website for years, all of it wiped away just like that. I'll admit that this was a very extreme measure for them to take. There were probably other options out there for them if they wanted to keep the comments up on their site. But I'd argue that we wouldn't have even been in this situation if it weren't for this deliberate attempt made by these pathetic individuals to take down a series which features LGBTQ+ characters and tackles issues specifically for them. It's a shame that it has overshadowed the actual series itself because it honestly doesn't deserve it. I know Crunchyroll isn't the only place where fans can talk to each other about what anime they've been watching, but their comments section is something that a majority of its user base found great value in, and that has been completely taken away from them. But do you want to know what you haven't taken away from us? Our right to exist. We have always been here, longer than you probably even realize. And we will continue to be here, no matter how many bills or laws you impose on us for being gay, or for being trans, or for being anywhere on that rainbow spectrum. Because we have a right to tell our own stories. And as long as we're still around to tell them, that is all that matters to us. I know times have been really tough for us lately, but despite this tumultuous time we live in right now, I can guarantee you that we will remain strong throughout. Whew, okay, that was a bit heavier than I intended it to be. I think it's about time we wrapped up this video. Twilight Out of Focus is frustrating to talk about. I apologize if my thoughts on the series came across as a bit muddled at points, but this was actually a really difficult review to write because I went back and forth on whether or not it was an anime that would be worth your time. Yes, the writing is very inconsistent, and the characters even more so, but when it was good, it was very engaging. It has a competently made production, but when it does get the chance to show its more creative side, it was really striking. It has a lot of promising aspects that are unfortunately bogged down by its shortcomings. I guess what it all boils down to now is how the anime as a whole approached MLM relationships. And while there is a couple of instances of taboo subject matter in the beginning, as a whole, it's relatively respectful. Even in those scenes, which there are many of, just so you're aware, were surprisingly tasteful in their execution. It's handled really delicately and sensitively, but there's also a compassionate and artistic flair to them as well. Obviously, it's meant to serve as gratification to the audience who have spent so much of their time trying to see whether or not these anime boys will actually get with each other in the end. But at the end of the day, the way it goes about it is very consensual and ultimately really, really safe and secure. Despite the many gripes and grievances I have with this series as a whole, I think on the basis of those scenes alone, that makes it worthy of a recommendation from me. Anyway, that does it for me. I've been IrishAnimeFan, and until next time, Slán.